The storm rolled over Dallas like a warning from the sky, lightning tearing through the clouds with the same desperation that echoed inside the heart of a man who had forgotten what it meant to feel. Nathan Cole, a 38-year-old tech industry millionaire, had lived years in silent emotional exile, waking every morning in a penthouse high above the world yet feeling lower than he ever admitted. He had wealth, power, influence, but each night, as he stood beside the tall windows overlooking the city, he felt like a ghost haunting a life that didn't belong to him. His wife had passed 5 years earlier, leaving a wound time refused to heal. He avoided attachments, avoided warmth, avoided risking love ever again. But all of that began to crack the moment a shivering little girl tugged at his coat in a hospital hallway and whispered words that would take a lifetime to forget. "Please don't let my mom die. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly helps stories like this reach more hearts." Nathan hadn't meant to be at Mercy General Hospital that night. His driver had taken a wrong turn through the rain, and traffic forced them to stop outside the emergency entrance. When he stepped out to stretch his legs, a paramedic rushed past him, guiding a stretcher through the doors. On it lay a pale woman, barely conscious, her brown hair soaked with rain and tangled like she had been fighting the world for far too long. Running behind the stretcher was a tiny girl, maybe 7 or 8, with dark curls clinging to her cheeks and fear burning in her eyes brighter than the lightning overhead. Something about her raw panic hit him with a force he couldn't understand. Before he could look away, she broke free from a nurse's hold and ran straight to Nathan as if she somehow knew he was the only anchor in the chaos. That was the moment she whispered her desperate plea, her fingers trembling as they gripped the sleeve of a stranger who had forgotten what it meant to matter. Nathan's world shifted so abruptly he barely recognized himself. He followed the girl into the hospital without understanding why, drawn by something deeper than logic. The woman, whose name he learned was Sarah Miller, had collapsed from exhaustion after working double shifts at a diner for weeks. She had been raising her daughter, Ava, alone, fighting eviction, overdue medical bills, and a world that never gave her a break. The doctors worked urgently as Nathan listened quietly. She had severe pneumonia, dangerously advanced, worsened by stress and fatigue. If she didn't receive immediate specialized care, she might not make it through the night. As he stood there, his chest tightened in a way he had avoided for years. He didn't know these people, yet he couldn't walk away. Something in Ava's eyes, something painfully familiar, rooted him to the floor. He had seen that look before, in the mirror, the night he lost his wife. Without introducing himself, without explaining his reason, Nathan stepped into action. He used his private health network, called specialists, and arranged for an immediate transfer to a higher-level care unit. The staff were stunned by the speed with which doors opened, approvals rushed, and options expanded. But Nathan didn't care what they thought. He didn't care about the cost. He only cared about one exhausted woman fighting for breath and one terrified child clinging to hope like a life raft. He stayed the entire night in the waiting area, watching Ava sleep curled up in a chair, her head resting against his arm because she had decided he was safe. When the sun rose, casting warm light across the polished hospital floors, the doctors finally approached with news. Sarah was stable. Weak, but stable. She had made it through the night. Nathan felt something loosen in his chest, something he hadn't felt since before grief built walls around his life. But the story didn't end at survival. It truly began afterward. Over the next few days, Nathan returned to the hospital again and again, unable to explain the magnetic pull he felt toward the small family. He learned how Sarah had been abandoned by relatives, how she had lost her job once before when she had taken a day off to care for Ava during a fever, how she was one unnoticed catastrophe away from losing everything. She never complained, never raised her voice, never broke down in front of her daughter. But Nathan could see the exhaustion behind her smile, the weight she carried alone. When Sarah was strong enough to speak, she thanked him with tears she tried to hide. She had no idea he was a millionaire, she only saw men who stayed when he didn't have to. Nathan found her humility disarming, refreshingly real in a world where he was usually seen only for his money or his empire. Ava, meanwhile, attached herself to him like a small shadow. She brought him drawings, asked him questions, laughed at his dry humor, and reminded him irresistibly of a life he used to imagine, soft, ordinary, full of warmth. The hospital staff assumed Nathan was a relative, given the way he never left their side. When they eventually learned who he was, whispers filled the halls, but Nathan ignored them. For the first time in years, he didn't care about reputation or guarded routines. He cared about two strangers who somehow frightened him less than the loneliness he had lived with for far too long. When Sarah was discharged, reality hit like a cold wind. She had no way to pay for the remaining hospital bills, no ability to return to work until fully recovered, and an eviction notice waiting at her apartment door. Nathan stood beside her as she read it, her shoulders trembling, her strength finally cracking under the relentless pressure. She tried to smile for Ava, tried to insist everything would be fine, but Nathan could see the truth in her eyes. She didn't know what to do anymore. No woman should have to break this quietly. And no child should watch it happen. Nathan made a choice that surprised even him. He offered them a place to stay, not out of pity, but because he wanted to. He framed it as temporary support until they could stabilize their lives. Sarah resisted at first, pride and fear battling inside her, but when Ava grabbed her hand and whispered that she liked the kind men, Sarah finally agreed. Nathan brought them to his home, a place that had been beautiful yet hollow for years, and watched it transform into something different the moment they stepped inside. Ava's laughter filled the empty rooms, her sketchbook scattered across coffee tables, her questions echoing like small sparks of life. Sarah, still fragile but recovering, began cooking simple meals in the kitchen, humming softly as if trying not to disturb the past that lingered in every corner. Nathan found himself lingering nearby, drawn to the warmth returning to a place he had long abandoned emotionally. Weeks turned into months. The arrangement that began as temporary became something none of them wanted to end. Nathan helped Sarah enroll in online courses so she could qualify for better jobs. He encouraged her, but never pushed her, respecting her independence. Sarah helped him too, though neither of them said it aloud. She brought back human softness into his life, the warmth of someone asking how his day was, the comfort of shared meals, the simple peace of sitting on the porch during Texas sunsets. Their connection grew slowly, quietly, gently, like two wounded hearts learning to beat again. Ava adored Nathan, and he found himself slipping naturally into a protective, father-like role. He attended her school events, helped her with homework, and listened to her stories with an attention he hadn't given anyone in years. But every story has a moment of doubt. One evening, after tucking Ava into bed, Sarah approached Nathan in the living room. She told him she felt guilty, guilty for relying on him, guilty for being a burden, guilty for letting herself feel safe in a world that had never allowed her such luxury. She said she needed to move out soon, needed to take control of her life without leaning too hard on someone who didn't owe her anything. Nathan listened, his chest tightening with a fear he didn't want to face. He realized, painfully and undeniably, that he didn't want her or Ava to leave. They weren't guests anymore. They were the missing pieces of a life he never thought he would rebuild. Nathan walked outside to steady himself, staring at the skyline as memories of his late wife washed over him. He had promised himself he would never love again, not because he didn't want love, but because he feared losing it. But now, standing beneath the Dallas night sky, he finally understood something. Love doesn't replace the past, it adds to it. Healing doesn't erase pain, it walks beside it. The next morning, he gathered his courage. While Ava played in the yard, he asked Sarah to trust him the way he had learned to trust her. He told her she wasn't a burden, that she had given life back to a house that had been silent for too long, that her presence had healed wounds he thought would remain forever open. He admitted that he wasn't asking her to stay because he pitied her, but because he cared deeply. More deeply than he had expected. Sarah listened with tears filling her eyes, not tears of fear this time, but of recognition. She felt it too. She had tried to fight it, hide it, deny it, but the truth glowed quietly inside her. They chose, together, not to run from what was growing between them. Not to force the future, but to welcome it. And slowly, day by day, their small, unexpected family blossomed into something whole. Nathan adopted a gentler routine, learning again how to enjoy mornings together, laughter at dinner, quiet evenings where the world seemed finally at peace. Sarah healed not only in body, but in heart, rediscovering strength she had nearly lost. And Ava, the little girl who had whispered for help on a rainy night, now ran freely through a home filled with love, knowing she no longer had to face the world alone.